Whenever there's a underperforming AAA game or a AAA game gets announced that's revealed to be open world, or in this case, the state of the industry with all of these unneeded and ridiculous layoffs, people will post this meme of Sonic saying, "I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less," and I'm not kidding. I think I speak for everyone where the second half of that about being paid more to work less should happen, and I have no issue with that part of the meme. The whole point of this video is I take issue with the shorter games with worse graphics. That is a total lie, and people should stop using this. There's probably people out there like me that have been in the trenches for years playing video games no one has heard about. You can look at my channel as proof. My most recent guide videos were for Mondili and only had 45 players according to True Achievements, and over on Steam it had an all-time peak of less than 800. Now I don't want to be like that guy that was in points saying like fake fan, but we know the vast majority of gamers online, and this includes the gaming media personalities, only want the blockbuster AAA event games or the indie games that are propped up via publisher, Raw, Fury, Devolver Digital, and the likes of them, or being championed by a console manufacturer during one of their big events during the year, or indie games that just have that one viral moments, either with streamers or just word of mouth. People who use this meme want to have their cake and eat it too. I really don't know what people mean by this. Do they mean going back to the 360 era? Maybe even PS2? There's been countless indie games using various amounts of art styles since the dawn of time. There's the 8-bit stuff, the 16-bit stuff. Now there's people going for the PS1 aesthetic. And we can't forget about all the AAA to B tier or single A games that come out each year. We're also in the era of Digital Foundry, where they point out something you would only notice if they point it out and it's like zoomed in like 200 times. I do think Digital Foundry does good work. It's great that they do what they do. They help out with devs. The bad thing about this is it's no fault of Digital Foundry themselves, but a bunch of people just use like a single frame graph where there's a bunch of frame dips in this one section, or the resolution's super low. And I think this is where the hypocrisy of worse graphics appears. We've seen it with Starfield, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and recently Rise of the Ronin. It's like, what? All these games look great. Like, who cares if there's a messed up texture in some spots, or the facial animations look weird, or just the character models aren't like the greatest. In case of Rise of the Ronin, we had people complaining on Twitter and even in the previews and reviews from the press mention the graphics as a negative towards the game, even though I think it looks pretty neat. Obviously, it's not a stunner, but it looks good. And if you look at like Team Ninja's release cadence so far, it's like pretty crazy. And it's an open world game, so you know on a budget those ones aren't going to be looking the greatest. And if a highly anticipated PS5 exclusive can't get a pass, what are the chances other games have? Now, is it because Rise of the Ronin is having to deal with the stigma around PS5 exclusives where they have that aura around them where it has to be like super great? And we've seen this with like Days Gone. That was kind of like the black sheep of that era, of where Sony just kept having banger after banger after banger, and Days Gone came along and just kind of like was the black sheep. Got some middling reviews, but it ended up selling well. And especially with Rise of the Ronin's case, Ghost of Tsushima is on PS5 now, and the sequel is bound to get announced this year. And it's pretty clear the vast majority of people do not want worse graphics. What people should start saying is they want stylized graphics instead. Spoiler alert, all those shorter games never left. They were always there, just sitting there, getting ignored. From AAA down to indie and everything in between, there's so many games that are on the shorter side of things. One of the perfect examples of this meme is Gangs of Sherwood. Short game with quote-unquote worse graphics, 4 to 5 hour runtime, only $40. And why didn't people play it? If you want to learn more about that game, I do have a video and some guys on my channel about it. There was also Return to Grace, was recently added to Game Pass, and that's how I played it. It's a walking sim that's only a couple hours long, and it's got some decent graphics and some nice voiceovers. And I barely heard about anybody talking about that game. Check that one out if you haven't already. We even had people disappointed that the fact that Hellblade 2 was revealed to be around the same length as the first game, which is around 8 hours. Now that one looks insane. It's only $50 too, so I'm not sure what the deal is with that. Modern Warfare 3 was ripped to shreds just because of its short campaign. Even though it's not the full package, I know people bring up the fact that it was $70 and it shouldn't have been released like that. I know there's people that out there that hate paying the big bucks for a quote-unquote short game, and I can understand that because I'm somewhat hesitant to buy a game because of a price. Mainly indie games are a hard pill to swallow at like $20 to $30 depending on what type of game it is. Remember when we had two personalities at IGN discussed the idea that Obsidian should have canceled Grounded and The Outer Worlds 2 in Shelf Avowed so they can work on the next Fallout or Elder Scrolls. In the case of Grounded, what would 20 people even add to a project that wasn't even far along in the first place? Look at Grounded now. Across 20 million players, and it's coming to PlayStation and Switch. Now you're probably asking where are all those licensed games that we used to have in the PS2 and 360 era. And these have always been there too, just not the ones you want. You got publishers like Microids, Outright Games, and various brands under Embracer, which might slow down because Embracer had those ridiculous layouts. Thankfully, Saber Interactive got out from under Embracer, and now it looks like Gearbox is going to too. Outright Games is mostly focused on kid games like Paw Patrol, PJ Masks, and the Bluey game. Microids is the same but more varied. They publish like Agatha Christie games, and most recently include Tintin, Survivor, and Inspector Gadget. Every day there's a shorter and cheaper game release. You just gotta look. Now, we all know why people who post this meme don't really mean it, and it can all be seen through the review scores and the types that they play or they don't play. And for AAA dev gets roasted for getting 6s and 7s, how could a smaller game survive? Take Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, for example. It's got some decent scores across the board, and it was written off. I mean this with no disrespect when I say this, but we all know the AA games are usually on a quality level below the bigger studios, and that's fine. Not every game has to be the GOAT level Game of the Year contender. Sometimes games just don't come together, whether it be the studio punching above their weight, budget restraints, rushing to meet deadlines. No one sets out to make a bad game. Bringing it back around, these AA games usually have the quote-unquote worst graphics already, and most of the time they're docked points for it. As I have grown older, the more interesting and fun titles comes from the games that have the mixed review scores instead of the 8s, 9s, and 10s across the board. More media sites need to utilize the full 1 to 10 scale. With IGN always seemingly giving out 7s, it's devaluing that range of scores. There's been that silly image that pops up now and then about the modern review scale where low 7s start where the games are bad. But back in the day, that was only for the ones that are like 3 and below. For some reason, the current sentiment with the Rise of the Ronin, now we got the review scores in, it's around 70-ish range, and that is seen as disappointing for some whatever reason, even though that's a great score still. And On the flip side, we got Princess Peach Showtime, and that's seen as a quote-unquote good 7. I don't know what's going on there. This meme should be retired because, in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense. Worse graphics is always seen as a negative, and people always try to bring the price to hour of gameplay ratio. So I want to pose a question. If you made it this far, would you play any of the games that have been shown in this video? I would say they all fit the criteria of having worse graphics and on the shorter side of things. And if so, great. And if not, that's fine too, because not every game is for everyone. Gaming discourse online would be better if everyone looked at their respective console storefronts or Steam and just took a chance on a game that has quote-unquote worse graphics. Who knows, it might actually be fun. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just had to get it off my chest. I was just seeing all these people like post this meme, and it's like, you already have those games that you want, but really you don't want those. They want the AAA sensibilities of the dev power and all that spread across every tier of game, and that's just not realistic. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.